Howdy folks, Mr. K here with a lesson on balancing chemical equations. So here's an example of a chemical equation. As you can see, there's several parts to it. This part is called the reactants. It's basically what's going in, what your starting materials are. This side we refer to as the products. It's what you're making. Notice in this case we have just one thing in the reactants decomposing into two things in the products. Now, there's a very large problem with this equation because it's not following this. Matter and energy in the universe are constant. Matter, you can't create it and you can't destroy it. You can only change it. Now, how does this relate to this chemical equation up here? Well, take a look. Let's count how many atoms we have on both sides. So, I have a mercury, and in my reactants I have one mercury. I have an oxygen, and in my reactants I have one oxygen. In my products, though, I have one mercury. Look at this. I have two oxygens in my products. And notice, well, why didn't I just write, O? Why did I have to put O2? That's because oxygen is referred to as being diatomic. Oxygen can't sit by itself. It's got to have somebody with it. It either has to be bonded to something, or if it can't find a different element, bonded to itself. That's why I can't just write Hg plus O over there. It has to be Hg plus O2. So, how do we fix this problem? We use something called coefficients. We put numbers here to multiply the number of atoms in the compound. Let me do this one example so you can get an idea of what I mean. So, I have set my chart back up. I have one mercury in my reactants, and I have one mercury in my products. That's fine, that's good. Let's not mess with that. I have one oxygen in my reactants, but I have two oxygens in my products. Sorry for the noise, my mic fell off. Okay, so back to the problem at hand. I need to take this number, or maybe this compound, and multiply by something. I have to multiply by some number to end up with 2. So what times 1 would equal 2? 2 times 1 equals 2. So I put a 2 right there. But now I have another problem. That 2 right there affects more than just the oxygen. Yes, now that I put a 2 there, I have 2 oxygens, and they match. But I also have 2 mercuries. Now you may ask, well, Mr. K, why would you do that? Why can't I just put a 2 right there? You can't when you're balancing. This is mercury 2 oxide. This cannot be made. That is a completely different substance. You have to keep the substance you're using the same. So instead of adding in subscripts, we add in coefficients to balance. So now that I have a coefficient 2 in front of my HGO, I have 2 mercuries and 2 oxygens in my reactants. So I'm good right here with my oxygens, but not so good in my Hg. So what could I put right here so I have 2? Isn't 2 times 1 2? So now I have 2 mercuries. And I'm good. If you want to, you can put a 1 right here, or you can leave it blank. We don't need to adjust this oxygen in the products because we have 2 oxygens in reactants, we got 2 in products, we have 2 mercuries in reactants, and we have 2 in products. So everything is hunky-dory now. Let's try another one. We got more stuff this time. Still same procedure. Let's take a look at what's happening. Set up our chart. So we have our reactants, we have our products. In our reactants we have iron. You start at the left and go to the right. So iron, we have 1 of them in our reactants, and we have 1 in our products. That's good. Okay. Next up, chlorine. I have 3 in my reactants, but I only have 1 in my products. So I need to multiply this by something so that it equals 3. What times 1 equals 3? 3 times 1. So if I do 3 times 1, I now have 3 chlorines on both sides. Next up is K. In my reactants, I have 1, but in my products, I have 3. This 3 applies to both the potassium and the chlorine. So, since I have 3 in my products, what should I multiply this by so that it equals 3? What times 1 equals 3? 3. 3 times 1 equals 3. So now I'm good to go there. Next up, oxygen. Oxygen has 3 now in the reactants. It also has this 3 outside the parentheses applies only to this oxygen and this hydrogen. So I have 3 oxygens there. My hydrogens in reactants have 3, and my hydrogens in products have 3. I'm good and balanced here. Let's try another one. Okay, another one. This time, I got slightly more elements. I'm going to kind of up the difficulty. I'm not going to use the chart this time. So, 1 element at a time. Let's look at sodium. I have 1 sodium in my products, but I have 2 in my, or I have 1 in my reactants and 2 in my products. So, what times 1 would equal 2? Okay, next, I have 2 chlorines now. Because this 2 also applies to chlorine. I have 2 chlorines in my reactants, but I only have 1 in my products. So I'm going to have a 2 here. Hydrogens, I got 2 in my reactants. I got 2 in my products. That's good. Sulfur, I have 1 in my reactants, 1 in my products. Oxygens, I have 4 in reactants and 4 in products. Balanced. Let's try another. Now, note about this. Polyatomic ions. Compounds that move together and carry a charge. Instead of making your life difficult and looking at the oxygen split up into 2 groups and trying to count them and balance them as just 1 together, that will make life difficult. Notice that the SO4 moved as a group. It went from SO4 with aluminum to SO4 with calcium. In the reactants, the OH went to being with calcium to being with aluminum. They moved as a group. So treat them as a group. Don't try to split them up into their individual elements. So when you do the chart on this, do this instead. Say I have Al, I have SO4, I have Ca, and I have OH. Don't split them up into individual elements here. So, my reactants, I have 2 aluminums. My products, I have 1. So I need to multiply this by something. My sulfites, I have 3. I have 3 sulfates here, but I only have 1 of them here. So I need to multiply this by something. My calciums, I have 1 here in my reactants, and I have 3 in my products. So I need to multiply this one by something. And my hydroxides, I have 6, because 3 times 2 is 6. I have 6 in my reactants, and 2 times 3, I have 6 in my products. Let's go through and make sure everything's balanced. So, once again, let's check everything. I'm going to erase what I wrote here, make sure it's balanced. You should never just go through it once to see that it's balanced. You need to go back a second time, double check. So I have 2 aluminums in reactants. I have 2 aluminums in products. Sulfates. I have 3 in my reactants, and I have 3 in my products. Calcium. I have 3 in my reactants, and I have 3 in my products. Hydroxides. I have 6 in my reactants, and I have 6 in my products. Balanced. Okay, folks, that is how you balance equations. I will see you in class.